On today's episode of Locked On Mets, I will be giving a take that you're not going to find anywhere else on the internet. That Robinson Cano is going to be good for the Mets in 2022.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're listening to Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Locked On Mets is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Now, on today's show, I'm going to be making the argument for why Robinson Cano will be good for the Mets in 2022. In the first segment, I want to give some comps around sports as to how we are seeing players that get up in age still be effective as role players in the latter stages of their career, and why I believe Cano can be just that for the Mets in 2022. In the second segment, I'll talk about his time with the Mets so far and where I see value in Cano moving forward. And then in the last segment, I'll talk about what fans are already probably typing in the comment section about right now. I'll talk about the money he's going to be making and why it should not be a hindrance to the Mets moving forward. Before we get to any of that, though, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing about the Mets at justbaseball.com. So the superstar role player, we've seen it in sports. This is not something new. Guys get to the later stages of their career, they can no longer be the guy, and some of them are willing and able to accept a smaller role on a team and maybe, just maybe, help them win a championship. I'm not saying Cano is going to be the starting second baseman for the Mets and play 160 games. Now, the premise of my argument is that Robinson Cano can help the Mets next year. That's simple. That's what we're getting at. And if you go around sports, we have seen some other guys accept roles, even recently, where they have helped teams win championships. Look at the last Super Bowl winner, the Buccaneers. Ton of guys up and down that roster who are players who are all-stars or pro bowlers in the past who have taken smaller roles to help that team win. You look at Rob Gronkowski and Antonio Brown. Now, those guys probably closer to their primes than a Robinson Cano, but still role players for a really good team. You go to the NBA, the Lakers a couple years ago won a championship. Dwight Howard and Rajon Rondo, both on that team, both played roles coming off the bench. We've seen it in other sports, and we've seen it in baseball. Albert Pujols just did it for the Dodgers. He gets cut by the Angels. Everyone's ready to write him off, and me included. I thought, all right, his career's over. Great Hall of Fame career. It's a 41-year-old. Everyone knows that Pujols, or at least there's suspicion that Pujols, maybe even a little bit older than that 41-year-old birth date. So if he's 41, 42, 43, regardless, clearly a guy whose best days are behind him. Yet the Dodgers, the smartest team in baseball, scoop him up. And you're like, why do the Dodgers want anything to do with Albert Pujols? There's no DH in the National League, at least at this point. Why would they want him? Well, Pujols with the Dodgers hit 254, 299 on base, not great. 460 slugging, though, in 85 games. Got 204 at-bats, had a 101 WRC plus, which is weighted runs created plus, meaning he was 1% better than your league average hitter. But he had 12 home runs, started 37 games at first, played in 56 games at first base. He got some time. He was able to hit left-handed pitching very well, and he played a role for a Dodgers team that obviously won a ton of games and ultimately needed him. You go to Robinson Cano. Again, I'm not saying Cano should be the starting second baseman or the starting third baseman or even the full-time DH. But going into next year, Robinson Cano, assuming his contract does not prohibit you from doing other things, which it shouldn't, considering the fact that Steve Cohen has made it fairly clear the Mets are going to be a luxury tax team. This is not the Wilpons. This is not a $20 million contract that holds you back for years if you ignore the contract. And I love how fans are always so quick to point at the money as if they're writing the checks themselves. Why do you care what Steve Cohen pays on a luxury tax bill? Why does that get you so mad that Robinson Cano is going to make $20 million next year for the Mets, 20.25 to be exact. The Mariners still kicking in some of that $24 million salary. Why does that bother you so much? Because to me, I look at Robinson Cano next year and I think, wow, this year we saw a lot of Travis Blankenhorn and Jose Peraza. If you go to the bench bats, right? You go to the at bats this year. Jose Peraza got 142 at bats. Luis Guillorme 132. Brandon Drury 84. Travis Blankenhorn 23. Wilfredo Tovar 11. Jake Hager 8. Add it all together, comes out to a nice even 400 at bats. You're telling me that Robinson Cano this season couldn't have done better than some of those guys in those 400 at bats? You go to the pinch hitting appearances, right? How many at bats think the Mets had when it comes to their pinch hitters? Well, you got Brandon Drury at 30, Kevin Pillar had 23, Dom had 23, JD had 21, Luis Guillorme had 18, Peraza had 18, Villar had 17, Blankenhorn had 15, McNeil 15, Albert Almora Jr. 14, Patrick Mazeika 13, James McCann 11, Billy McKinney 11. You put that together, you add up some of the other ones that were less than the 10 pinch hit at bats, 234 pinch hitting opportunities for the Mets this year. Now, next year, there's a DH in play, probably. Less pinch hitting opportunities, but more at bats that need to be filled. You're telling me that Robinson Cano is not a better option than Jose Peraza to come up in a big spot? He's not better than, I don't even know, Albert Amora, Luis Guillorme, all those guys I just mentioned. Brandon Drury even had a great year. Small sample size. Really nice little pinch hitter for the Mets. You think Robinson Cano can't do that? That's where I'm at with this. I'm not talking about Robinson Cano living up to a $20 million paycheck. What I'm saying is screw the paycheck. Screw how much money he's making. What's he going to provide? Because Robinson Cano in 2019, and this is what we're going to talk about in the next segment, if you take his stats from 2019 and put him on this Mets team, one of the most productive hitters on the Mets, and that was the worst year of his career. This guy is a Hall of Famer who now has the worst reputation imaginable when it comes to being a PED user, twice caught. I get it. I'm not saying you have to root for Robinson Cano. But what I will say is when Robinson Cano comes up in a big spot in the 8th inning when your team's down by 2 and he's stepping up in the box instead of Jose Peraza and he laces a double and drives in 2, Mets fans are certainly going to be cheering him on. And suddenly those boos are going to turn into some cheers. So that's what we're going to talk about more, though, in the next segment. I want to talk about what his role could be and why I think that Robinson Cano can actually provide great value to the Mets in 2022. Does this sound familiar? You've got one device to let you catch the game live, another lets you stream your favorite shows, you're watching your sports highlights on your phone, and you've got your neighbors, best friends login for the other good stuff you're missing? Well, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all that entertainment you love without the hassle and a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called DirecTV Stream, and it brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before. So you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes, no need to buy another device ever again. And the best part, there's no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion. Get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directv.com. That's directv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package. So I know that reading Robinson Cano's bona fides isn't the best way to sway the angry commenter or tweeter on social media who's going to come at me and say this is a terrible take. I get it. You don't want to hear that. That's old news that's back in the past. But let's just for a second indulge me in revisiting what Cano's done in his career, steroids or not, and whether he's been an above average player pretty much every single year. This is a guy who has a career WAR of 69.6. That's 10th all time in the history of baseball for second baseman. He's an 8-time All-Star, 5-time Silver Slugger, career batting average of 303, on base percentage 352, career slugging 492, career OPS of 844, career WRC plus of 126. Again, weighted runs created plus, measures hitters based on a league average of 100. That means he's 26% better than a league average hitter across a career that spans the better part of 2 decades. Guy's been very good for a very long time. You want to go to the counting stats, right? A guy who, if he had 2 great years, would get into spitting distance of 3,000 hits. He's at 2,624 right now because of the steroid suspensions. He has probably robbed himself of the 3,000 hit club unless he has 2 amazing years with the Mets and even gets another contract after that, probably off the table. But you know what? That's what happens when you do steroids. And I'm not condoning the use of steroids. But let's just go through the numbers still and talk about what this guy's produced, steroids or not. RBIs, 1,302. Home runs, 334. Doubles, 571. He is 57th all-time history of baseball in extra base hits. So let's then talk about what he's done recently, right? That's what people want to say. What have you done for me lately? I don't care about what you did with the Yankees in 2009 to help them win a World Series. What are you going to do for the Mets to help them win a World Series in 2022, 13 years later, a seventh grader later? Well, in 2020, Cano was good. He hit 316, 352 on base, 544 slugging, 10 home runs, 9 doubles, 171 at bats over 49 games. His WRC plus was 142. He was amazing for the 2020 Mets. And yeah, I know everyone's going to say it. Was he juicing? Probably. Do I care? Not really. I'm being honest. I mean, baseball is a game of cheaters. Astros are in the World Series again. Is it completely in the rear view what they did in 2017? No, people still talk about it. The 1986 Mets, they just had a huge documentary on them. That team was fueled on greenies. At the end of the day, cheating in baseball kind of goes hand in hand. And while I will not say that Cano is my favorite player, I'm not going to say I want him to take steroids, although I will admit, and I have had this take in the past, that if he were to get popped for a third time, I wouldn't lose sleep over it because then the contract would be off the books. But regardless of steroids or not, when he's on the field, the guy hits. And we just saw a team that couldn't hit at all. So personally, I look at Robinson Cano stepping up to the box. If he's healthy, probably better than a lot of the guys that you could be getting to come off the bench as a backup infielder. And that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about somebody who can compete for at bats at DH, at third base, at second base, and if Pete Alonso gets hurt at first. That's what he can bring your team. And when you're talking about offensive upside, Cano's got more than Guillorme. He's got more than Peraza. And honestly, even though VR just had a great year, I think Robinson Cano has a better chance to be an above average hitter in 2022 than even Jonathan VR. Because you know what? In his worst career year, which I referenced earlier, 2019, everyone says first year at the Mets, by far worst year of his career. Well, guess what? He hit 256, 307 on base. Not good. 428 slugging, but he had 13 home runs, 28 doubles, 41 extra base hits. This year, that would have made him he would have had, the second most extra base hits on the Mets behind Pete Alonso. Nobody else even got to 40. So I'm sorry. When you look at how bad that Mets team was, and especially at driving the baseball, I'll take 25 doubles and 15 home runs from Robinson Cano next year gladly. Even if he produces like he did in 2019, that's value for the Mets. His WRC plus in 2019 was 94. Was it great? No. Was that below average? Yes, but not significantly below average. And that's what you run into when guys like Kevin Pillar are getting 400 at bats for the Mets. So you look at what he's done throughout his career. You look at his ability to drive the baseball. You look at the fact that even though he's not a great defender, he was still worth 3 outs above average in 2020 at second base. Very good. And 1 out above average in 2019. Guy has soft hands. He's coming from a Gold Glove pedigree. So even though he's not athletic, doesn't have range, if you position him in the right place, he's going to field the balls that are hit to him. He's going to be better at third base than JD Davis, even though he has rarely played the position throughout his career, just for the simple fact that he's got softer hands and way better baseball IQ than honestly most players on the Mets in general. This is still a guy who is a classic gamer who has for a very long time helped a lot of teams win a lot of games. So that's where I'm at with this. You look at a guy who in 2020 was in the 94th percentile in strikeout rate. In 2019, again, worst year, he's in the 79th percentile around baseball. He's a good at bat. And if we wipe away the money, I think there's value to be found here with Robinson Cano. And that's what I'm going to talk about in just a minute. I want to go through what the contract looks like over the next 2 years and why that should not prevent the Mets from adding to this team and why it should still be a contract that in some ways can benefit them moving forward. Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar ever. Did you know that Built Bar has so many delicious flavors that there really is something for everyone, whether it's the coconut bar, cherry barcia, raspberry, mint brownie, double chocolate, German chocolate, salted caramel, strawberry, orange, or my personal favorite, cookies and cream. If you haven't tried all the flavors, you can get a mixed box where you'll get two of each. You can see which ones you like best. It really is a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. These bars come covered in 100% chocolate. They're soft, they're easy to chew, and they're healthy. Built Bars come low in calories, low in sugar, but they're high in protein and high in fiber. If you want to try Built Bar today, go to builtbar.com, use the promo code LOCK15, and you'll get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at builtbar.com. Now, before we talk about the contract, I again do not want my words to get twisted here. I'm not saying that Robinson Cano is going to be a $20 million player next year. I'm not saying he's worth that. I'm not saying if he was a free agent right now, the Mets should sign him at that number. Of course not. But I don't want to cry over spilled milk either. This is a mistake from a past regime that brought in his former client and decided that was his first big move. He was going to stake everything to Robinson Cano. And obviously, you go back and you never make that trade. But the trade's been made. Edwin Diaz is your closer, and Robinson Cano's going to be getting at bats next year. That's the reality of the situation. But what I'm trying to do is change how you think about it because fans are so quick to cry about the money. Oh no, he's making so much. Why do you care? Seriously. With the Wilpons, I got it. I mean, that makes sense. That was a ownership group that would be hamstrung by this contract. But assuming the Mets are going to blow through the luxury tax, which all indications are they're going to do that, assuming Steve Cohen is going to pay for a team with a payroll upwards of 250, who knows how high that number can climb. $20 million for Robinson Cano is not a backbreaker. It doesn't stop you from doing anything when that is the ballpark that you're living in now. And you have that owner that's willing to spend. And there's value in being able to, instead of having to eat money on this contract just to squeeze, let's just say the Mets were to eat half of the salary and trade him to an American League team, or I guess any team now that would need him as their DH. You're going to be getting negative value in that trade because it's a negative value contract, but it becomes a positive value to you by just swallowing the money and accepting the production for what it is, not forcing him into a starting role because he's making $20 million, not forcing him out of town by eating a bunch of money and trading for him or trading him away and maybe giving up prospects to offload him. But instead, you just sit there, you take your medicine, you say, all right, this is what's happening. He's going to be on our team. How do we maximize him? Get him off his feet. Have him be the DH. Have him compete, though. I'm not saying he gets that job. You got Dominic Smith, JD Davis, one of them likely is still here. Who knows? Maybe they trade them both, and that DH spot's wide open for Cano. Cano is a guy that, hey, let's just say Javi Baez is your second baseman, and either him or Lindor goes down with an injury. Well, Robinson Cano comes from the DH role, can fill in for 20 games, play some second base, continue to keep that lineup moving. Third base, he's insurance there. The Mets have already said that Cano is going to play some over the winter in whatever winter league he plays at third base so he can get comfortable playing that position because that is a clear hole for the Mets. And again, I look at Robinson Cano right now. If you told me who do I want as the starting third baseman in 2022, Robinson Cano or JD Davis? Personally, I would actually like the guy that could field a ground ball and not double clutch every time and then arrow mail a throw to Pete Alonso and then blame Pete Alonso for his arrow mailed throw. I would rather have the guy that for his career has been an above average hitter year after year after year, who's going to go up, give you a good at bat. And when he has a pitch that he can drive, he's going to put it in the seats. JD Davis, as great as he was offensively this year, and you look at the numbers, had a solid offensive season, didn't hit home runs. He did not hit enough extra base hits. Cano, throughout his career, is always a doubles machine. And I think the Mets offense this season could have benefited from Robinson Cano. And look, I'm ready to eat crow when I'm wrong. I was someone who was, I don't want to say popping champagne, but certainly pretty happy when Cano popped for steroids the first time because I wasn't thinking about it like this. I was another one who said, hey, that's money off the books that can spend elsewhere. That's great. But now when you look at the reality of next season, I don't think this guy's stupid enough to test positive again. You never know, but I don't think he has enough Henry Mejia in him to test positive for a third time. So if he's going to be on your team, where's the value? And again, the value is this guy is likely going to be a good at bat. And even in 2019, where again, that was his worst year ever, he dealt with so many injuries that year that he was trying to play through, so many hand and wrist injuries that he just never felt comfortable, was never himself. And when he got comfortable at the end of the season, he started to hit. And then again, 2020, he really did hit and was a really good player for the Mets in that shortened season. But of course, we forget about that because it's a small sample size, a small year where obviously baseball wasn't as significant. But again, when we look at how the Mets are going to shape their roster, you hear the reports that Jonathan VR might be coming back to the Mets. He's interested in that. If you go into next season and your bench comprises of Robinson Cano and Jonathan VR and Louis Guillorme, Tomas Nido, whatever that bench ultimately looks like, there's going to be enough plate appearances that go around that Robinson Cano in a 250 to 400 plate appearance role, I think he can provide value to the Mets. And I think he gives you coverage in a lot of different places. Again, third base, first base, second base, DH, where he can eat up some at bats, get some playing time. He might not even be a starter or a player that you rely on to get in or once you're in the postseason. But to get to the postseason, to deal with those 2 weeks where you have 3 guys out of the lineup, I think you're going to be pretty happy that it's Robinson Cano stepping out to the box in certain situations instead of Travis Blankenhorn. And that's no disrespect to Blankenhorn, who I actually like a little bit, but we're talking about a Hall of Fame talent who will not get in the Hall of Fame because of steroids, who will never be respected around baseball circles because of the steroids, who never has to be cheered on by the fans anymore because of steroids, but a guy that can still hit a double in a big spot. And personally, that is the entire basis of my argument here. It's not that this guy's going to be great. It's not that this guy's going to be worth the money, but he's going to be a member of the 2022 Mets. And I think when the season's done and we look back on everything, I think he's going to provide some value for the Mets and help them in their search to win a division title and get back into the playoffs. And the one thing I'll say, because I should probably mention, I haven't talked much about the playoffs on this podcast. The Braves are going to the World Series. The Mets have to do everything they can to knock them off the mountaintop next year. And I don't believe that after watching this World Series play out, a $20 million contract to Robinson Cano, I don't think that that's really going to stop Steve Cohen from spending in any way, shape, or form. And because it won't, that is where the value is here with Cano next season. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB. Sully's got you covered for everything going on with the playoffs this October. Follow Locked On MLB wherever you get podcasts.